Before the Flood by Matson. The Fall of Atlantis. Chapter 1. The Arena of Kalliste. The sun hung high and merciless over the ancient stone arena of Kalliste, a blazing eye that seemed to judge every drop of sweat and every splash of blood spilled upon the packed earth below. Dust churned upward in thick, choking clouds with each clash of bodies and weapons, mixing with the acrid scent of sweat, fear, and the metallic tang of freshly spilled blood. This was no simple place of games. The arena of Kalliste was a sacred circle of violence, carved into the rocky hillside centuries ago by the hands of men who still remembered the days when the Watchers first descended. Tiered seats of rough-hewn limestone rose in concentric rings around the fighting pit, worn smooth by countless generations of spectators whose cheers had long since fed the growing violence that choked the antediluvian world. Banners of dyed wool, crimson for the lifeblood of fallen warriors, deep black for the encroaching spiritual night, snapped and cracked in the hot, dry wind, blowing down from the olive-covered hills. Vendors moved through the crowd selling roasted meats, watered wine, and small clay amulets inscribed with crude invocations to minor watchers. Thousands had gathered, farmers with calloused hands, merchants from distant coastal villages, young bloodline aspirants hungry for glory, and veiled women clutching children who should never have witnessed such savagery. In this age of lengthening lifespans and multiplying humanity, every public contest served a darker purpose. It fed the hunger, it normalized the horror, it prepared the world for the greater bloodshed to come. Leon stood at the southern edge of the fighting pit, his bronze shield strapped firmly to his left forearm, a short stabbing spear balanced lightly in his right hand. At 24 years, he cut an imposing figure even among the tall, hardy men of Tanaju. Broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed from years working the rocky fields and training in the hills, he possessed a natural athletic grace that belied the power sleeping in his blood. His dark hair was bound back by a simple leather cord, and his eyes, stormy gray-green, like the unpredictable Mediterranean, held a quiet intensity that made lesser men pause. A single faint scar traced the line of his jaw from a boyhood skirmish, but otherwise his body remained clean, untwisted by the grotesque mutations that already marred so many older warriors of the Guff bloodline. Not yet, at least. The corruption always began subtly. Beside him waited his sworn team of 4, bound not only by the rules of the ritual melee, but by deeper ties of blood oath and shared ambition. Stelios, the unbreakable tank at 34, loomed like a human fortress. Barrel-chested with arms thick as young tree trunks, he sported a thick black beard braided with iron rings and ritual scars across his chest that pulsed with faint inner light when his temper rose. He carried no spear, only a massive bronze-banded club reinforced with iron studs and a shield broad enough to shelter 2 men. "Easy meat today," he growled, voice like grinding stones. "Those Pylos dogs move like drunken oxen fresh from the trough." To Stelios's left, Lysandros made final adjustments to the satchel of delicate glass vials and dried herbs slung at his hip. Lean and scholarly in build, with pale skin that spoke of long hours spent in shadowed libraries rather than under the sun, the pharmacia practitioner of the Order of Moach offered a thin, calculating smile. "Do not grow complacent, brother. Their leader carries the reek of Azamon's distant lineage, Ring 3 influence, if the trade rumors from the East hold true. One well-placed drop of my contact poison, and their strength will become the very chain that drags them to the dust." Piron, the youngest at 26, laughed with reckless fire. His wild mane of red hair caught the sunlight like living flame, and the burn scars mapping his forearms and neck told the tale of his growing mastery over pyromancy. "Let them come," he crowed, flames dancing playfully at his fingertips before he forced them to extinguish with visible strain. The air around him shimmered with rising heat, carrying the scent of scorched earth. "I'll roast them where they stand and feed their ashes to the wind." Boreas, tall and wiry, with pale gray eyes and wind-tousled hair, said nothing at all. He simply flexed his long fingers, stirring a subtle, cooling breeze that washed over the team, easing the oppressive heat. His aromancy was precise and deadly, a quiet counterpoint to Piron's wildness. Leon nodded to each in turn, but his thoughts drifted far beyond the immediate fight. For weeks, tantalizing whispers had spread through the coastal villages like smoke on the wind. A grand tournament in distant Atlantis, the crown jewel of pre-flood corruption. 10 concentric rings of unimaginable wealth and depravity. 8 teams of 5 per ring, battling to the death. Survivors earning the right to challenge the reigning Nephilim giant king of that ring. Then, once new kings were crowned, a final tournament of rulers in the central palace, where the 10 victors would fight for the golden throne itself. Glory, power, daughters, covenants, the gifts of the 3 orders, Pharmacia, Altering, Mancy, would flow freely to the champions. For a young Guff bloodline warrior like Leon, the lure was almost irresistible. Yet, beneath the excitement stirred something darker, a restlessness that tasted less of ambition and more of divine dread. The great horn sounded, a deep, mournful blast from a polished conch shell the size of a grown man's torso, blown by a priest in blood-red robes. The signal for death. The 2 teams charged across the blood-stained sand. Leon exploded forward, spear lowered, shield raised high. The Pylos leader, a brutish giant of a man named Dracos, met him with a bellowing roar that shook the air. Their shields collided with the force of thunder. The impact jarred through Leon's entire frame, rattling his teeth, but he planted his feet and held like an anchor in a storm. Raw, inherited strength from his Guff bloodline surged through his arms and shoulders. He twisted at the last instant, driving his spear past the rim of Dracos' shield. Bronze point scraped against bone. Dracos howled in agony as the spearhead bit deep into his shoulder. Chaos erupted around them. Stelios became a living battering ram, his massive club sweeping 2 Pylos fighters off their feet with wet, sickening cracks of breaking bone. One man's arm bent at an unnatural angle, the other's skull caved inward. Piran unleashed a roaring fireball that engulfed a charging opponent's cloak and hair, transforming the warrior into a screaming, flailing human torch who stumbled blindly before collapsing in a heap of charred flesh. Lysandros moved like a shadow, flinging precise pinches of shimmering powder that thickened the very air around an enemy's legs, turning swift strides into sluggish, stumbling lurches. Boreas capitalized instantly, compressing the wind into razor-sharp blades that opened throats and spilled arterial blood in bright crimson arcs. The crowd surged to its feet, roaring approval that bordered on religious ecstasy. Blood sprayed in wide fans across the dust. Severed limbs twitched. The smell of burned hair and opened bowels thickened the air. Leon fought with a focused, almost trance-like fury, born of necessity. He disarmed one opponent with a brutal shield bash that shattered the man's wrist, then drove his spear through the warrior's thigh, pinning him momentarily to the arena floor. The fallen fighter clutched desperately at the shaft, eyes wide with animal terror and lingering humanity. For a single agonizing heartbeat, Leon hesitated. There was still a man behind those eyes, someone's son, perhaps a father. But the thunderous roar of 10,000 spectators drowned any whisper of mercy. Leon twisted the spear viciously and pulled it free, ending the life with a final thrust to the heart. One by one, the Pylos team was dismantled. Dracos, bleeding heavily from his shoulder, charged Leon in a final desperate rage, foam flecking his lips. Leon dropped his spear at the last moment, seized the brute's thick wrist, and used the man's own momentum against him in a perfect hip throw. Draco slammed into the dirt with bone-jarring force. Before the giant could recover, Leon planted a sandaled foot squarely on his chest, raised his spear high, and looked to the priest for the signal. The horn blew twice. Victory for Kalliste. The arena exploded in pandemonium. "Leon! Leon of Kalliste!" the crowd chanted. "Future king! The winged one approaches!" Flower petals and copper coins rained down from the upper tiers. Leon stood panting, chest heaving, sweat carving clean channels through the grime, and blood coating his skin. His teammates converged on him, Stelios clapping his back hard enough to stagger a lesser man, Piron whooping wildly, Lysandros offering a rare, genuine smile, Boreas simply nodding with quiet respect. Relief washed over them, the wild, giddy relief of men who had danced with death and lived to tell the tale. Yet even as the adrenaline began to ebb, Leon felt it, the first true stirring of his inheritance. Deep within his shoulders and forearms, a supernatural heat bloomed, unrelated to the midday sun. For the briefest instant, bright blue fire flickered just beneath his skin, invisible to the cheering masses, but searing against his own nerves like both divine promise and terrible warning. Kion. The name rose unbidden from the depths of his blood, his personal watcher from the Order of Guff. The entity that had haunted his lineage since the ancient covenants, but had always, stubbornly, refused to reveal its true name. In quiet moments of invocation, Leon had taken to calling the being Kion, dog, in the old Tanaju tongue, half insult, half strange affection. The watcher seemed darkly amused by the irreverence. Stelios gripped Leon's arm, eyes shining. "You fought like one touched by the gods themselves today, brother. The rumors from the western ships speak truth. The Atlantis tournament is no myth. Teams already sailing from every shore. 10 rings of gold and death. 8 teams of 5 fighting until only survivors remain to challenge each ring's giant king. Then the 10 new kings battle for the ultimate throne. Power beyond dreams awaits those strong enough to claim it." Lysandros cleaned blood from his slender hands with a cloth infused with calming pharmacia herbs. "Poseidon's 10 sons grow bloated with arrogance. The runt himself grows desperate. This is our moment, if we survive the blood price." Piron's grin was feral, though faint new charring already darkened the edges of his burn scars. "Blue flames on your arms, wings to rule the sky. We could become kings of entire rings, Leon. Legends." Boreas remained characteristically silent, but a protective swirl of cool wind encircled the group, shielding them momentarily from the press of the crowd. Leon forced a weary smile. Perhaps, but inside the heat pulsed stronger. He could almost hear Kion's low, rumbling chuckle echoing in the recesses of his mind. "Use me, little pup. Become so much more." The team was escorted from the arena amid showers of petals, coins, and adoring cries. Slaves offered water skins and wine. Leon drank deeply, but the liquid tasted flat and ashen on his tongue, tainted by the weight of what he had done, and what he might yet become. That night in the modest stone and timber house he shared with his aging mother and younger sister on the quiet outskirts of Kalliste, sleep came only after long hours of uneasy tossing. The oil lamp beside his simple pallet burned low, casting flickering shadows across the whitewashed walls, adorned with humble carvings of olive branches and protective runes. The dream descended upon him like a veil violently torn from the fabric of heaven itself. Leon stood upon a windswept cliff overlooking an island of impossible, blasphemous splendor. 10 concentric rings of gleaming marble and beaten gold radiated outward from a towering central palace that seemed to pierce the very vault of the sky. Crystal-clear waterways glittered between the rings like veins of liquid sapphire, carrying barges laden with treasures and chained slaves. Lush gardens bloomed with flowers of unnatural size and vibrancy, their petals glistening as though fed by blood. Yet beneath the surface, beauty festered unimaginable rot. In the vast arenas, warriors and minor Nephilim fought to the death, while frenzied crowds cheered. In shadowed temples, black-robed priests offered screaming innocents, children, virgins, the faithful remnant, upon altars to towering statues of the Watchers. In opulent pleasure gardens, silk cushions lay stained with blood, and worse. Colossal giants, Nephilim kings, sons of Poseidon, lounged upon thrones of bone and precious metals, their bodies already twisting into monstrous parodies of the divine. Extra-armored limbs, skin like living stone, eyes burning with stolen fire. At the absolute center upon a grand throne carved from the bones of slaughtered faithful and inlaid with gold, sat Poseidon himself. 14 feet of towering, malevolent presence. His skin rippled and flowed with aquamantic power. Dozens of floating crystal points, Hataza's forbidden gift, stolen through cannibalistic rites, orbited him like deadly stars, ready to form spears, shields, or instruments of torture. Sharing the throne with casual intimacy was his favorite son, Thalorian, whose body was already fusing with thick, crustacean-like armor and massive claws. A voice spoke from behind Leon, gentle yet carrying the undeniable weight and authority of creation itself. Leon, son of Kalliste, descendant of the blood yet chosen for a higher purpose. He turned slowly. A solitary figure stood upon the cliff, robed in simple, radiant white, his face veiled in light so pure it brought tears to Leon's eyes. This was no fallen watcher, no Nephilim giant. This was something infinitely older, truer. The very air around the figure seemed to bow in reverence. The sea below stilled its waves. Leon's knees buckled. He fell prostrate upon the rocky ground. "Who are you, Lord?" he whispered, voice trembling. "I am the one who formed the heavens and the earth from nothing, the creator who breathed the breath of life into Adam's nostrils, the God who walked with Enoch in intimate fellowship until the day he was taken and was no more. I see the violence that fills the earth. I hear the cries of the innocent rising like smoke from 1,000 altars of abomination. I know the covenants made in darkness with my fallen sons." The vision shifted with terrifying clarity. The island of Atlantis trembled violently. Massive cracks split the marble rings asunder. Towering waves, higher than the greatest mountains, rose from the surrounding sea. The entire island convulsed like a living thing in its death throes. Nephilim giants and human revelers alike screamed as their empire of gold and blood was swallowed by the Mediterranean depths. Poseidon's final defiant roar was cut short, drowned beneath tons of crushing water. "You will enter the tournaments of Atlantis," the voice commanded, calm and utterly absolute. "You will fight through the battle of the rings. You will claim a throne among the 10. You will advance to the tournament of rulers. And in the final hour, by my hand and your obedience, you will cast this entire city of false gods, Nephilim tyrants, and watcher worship into the depths of the sea. Not by your own strength or the gifts of Kion, but through faithful obedience to me alone." Leon's heart thundered in his chest. Cold sweat broke across his brow. "Lord, I carry the blood covenant in my veins. Kion's power already stirs within me. How can one such as I, marked by the fallen, be chosen for such a task?" "Obedience has always been greater than power, my son. The Watchers pervert the hidden dimensions I created. Their gifts are beautiful chains that tighten with every use, deepening the corruption of mind, body, and spirit exactly as they predicted. Yet I delight in choosing the weak things of this world to shame the mighty. Walk with me, Leon, even as Enoch walked. Reject the growing hunger. The flood draws near for all flesh that rebels against me. But mercy, hope, and life remain for the faithful remnant who turn from the darkness. The radiant figure reached out and touched Leon's forehead with a finger of pure light. A final vision flashed before him. Peaceful green hills untouched by blood, small communities of the faithful singing praises beneath open skies, a future beyond the coming judgment. Then darkness swallowed everything. Leon woke with a violent gasp, drenched in cold sweat. The small clay oil lamp beside his pallet had burned nearly to nothing, casting weak, dancing shadows across the room. His arms burned with an inner fire. Bright blue flames flickered visibly just beneath the skin of his forearms, and faint, glowing scars like molten rivers began tracing themselves permanently into his flesh. He stumbled from the house into the cool, pre-dawn air. Ancient olive trees whispered softly in the gentle breeze. The stars wheeled overhead in their majestic, indifferent courses. Far below, the dark sea glittered under moonlight. "Kion," he whispered hoarsely into the night. The presence answered immediately, not with audible words, but surging through the marrow of his bones and the hidden dimensions of his blood. A low, predatory growl of dark amusement and insatiable hunger filled his mind. "You called for me at last, little pup?" Good. Power flooded him. Leon raised his hands. Bright blue flames erupted along his forearms, not consuming but empowering. Muscles swelled with godlike strength. Searing heat radiated outward. From his shoulders burst massive wings of blue fire, feathered with living flame that illuminated the grove like daylight. He flexed them experimentally. The displaced air roared. He leapt high, gliding gracefully for nearly 20 feet before landing in a crouch, the wings vanishing as swiftly as they had appeared. The physical and spiritual ache struck instantly, like a deep bruise upon his very soul. Whispers slithered through his thoughts. You could rule a ring. You could become a god among men. Why serve when you can command? Leon collapsed to his knees among the gnarled roots of an ancient olive tree, tears mixed with sweat on his face. Creator of all, if the vision you granted me is true, give me strength, not for my own glory, not for the hunger of power, but to obey your will, whatever the cost. A soft, gentle wind, unlike any Boreas could summon, stirred the leaves overhead. For one precious moment, the oppressive spiritual weight that had pressed upon the world for centuries seemed to lift. A small, defiant spark of hope kindled in Leon's chest, bright as the first star after an endless, starless night. Yet even as he prayed, far across the wine-dark great green, the black fleet of the 6 Egyptian Nephilim giants sliced through the waves, their monstrous laughter carried ahead of them on the salt-laden wind. They sailed towards spectacle and opportunity, unaware that the true instrument of judgment had just received his calling. The tournaments of Atlantis awaited, and the slow, inevitable judgment upon a rebellious world had finally found its chosen vessel in a reluctant warrior from Tanaju. Leon rose at last, returned inside, and sat beside the dying lamp. His mother stirred briefly in the next room, but did not wake. He stared at the glowing scars now etched into his arms. The blue fire had receded, but the power and the choice remained coiled within him, waiting. Tomorrow he would find his 4 companions. Tomorrow they would prepare to sail west toward glory, horror, and divine purpose. But tonight, for the first time in his young life, Leon prayed not to the Watchers or their seductive gifts, but to the Creator who had spoken directly into his soul. The words felt strange and holy upon his tongue, yet they burned with a truth deeper than any blood covenant. Outside, the stars continued their silent watch. In the hidden dimensions beyond normal perception, the fallen watchers stirred uneasily, sensing for the first time a single, dangerous thread of genuine rebellion woven into the vast, darkening tapestry of pre-flood corruption. All flesh is grass, and all its glory like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Thank you for listening. This has been an unabridged audio production of Before the Flood, The Fall of Atlantis. Chapter 1. The Arena of Kalliste by Matson. All rights reserved. Matson, LLC. Copyright Matson, LLC 2026. If you enjoyed this production, please share, like, and subscribe. For updates, follow the author at Matson. Available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Links in the description.